All right, so we'll get the faculty presentation part going. I just want to introduce our resident theorist, Ben Smith. Professor Smith will be moderating this session. I'm sure you're already sick and tired of hearing my voice. The first up is Ruben Garcia Rubio. Second, Margarita Joubert. A third, Emily Taylor Welty. A fourth, Byron Mouton. And the fifth, Charles Jones. And we'll have a discussion led by Professor Smith. All right. So, Ruben? Yep.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here today. I think that my presentation is sure.
What do you want to do?
It's just to make this full screen.
It was already full screen, but and let me do this.
Okay. So in my case, I'm going to introduce my research studio that is called Addis Ababa River City Project. You can see here. Okay, let me just show you with a couple of slides about the general frame. No, the general frame. As you can see here in this slide, these are only the major natural events that occur last year. No, we can see some of them that they are even familiar for us, like the Hurricane Ida that we suffer here. No, but especially what we will be focusing in our studio, it will be in those related with water. No, this is a image that I'm sure that you are also familiar. This happened in Europe with the European floodings in 2021. No, and this is just to show you the general frame of this project, because the main question of this research is what can we do as architects and urbanists to design a more resilient settlements. No. In our case, we are working in Ethiopia, actually in the capital of Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. This is the plan of Addis Ababa. This is the zoning plan where all the different activities are represented. But I will prefer to see Addis Ababa with this image, no? Because Addis Ababa is not like, for example, here in New Orleans, that we have just only one big river, but in that case, as you can see in this image, Addis Ababa has a lot of small rivers and tributaries. No, so this is what we call Addis Ababa River City, and that's where we will work about. No, because also the foundation of the city of Addis Ababa, as you can see in this image, was very related to the water bodies. No, here on the background of this photo, you can see the palace of the Emperor Menelik II, because he founded the city of Addis Ababa in that specific place because the existence of some hot springs, as you can see on the main plane, on the first plane of the image. But the relation between the city and the water bodies nowadays is this. No, it's just an open sewage system, let's say, that everybody just dumping everything just to the river, even though a lot of people, a lot of citizens, they still need, no, as in a very direct way. As you can see also, there is people that is just cleaning their clothes there. Also, they are using that water just directly to wash themselves, and also for cooking and so on. No, so this is the relation that is happening nowadays. But also, what we are seeing is that there are also some opportunities. No, we want to see that when there are some problems, some issues, some urban issues in this case, we can also, as architects and urbanists, to try to change that reality into an opportunity. No, and the idea of the research studio is to understand the rivers as urban catalysts, not just to change the situation that we have, that we can find nowadays, to something more related to a more closer relationship with the water bodies as it happened, not before, especially when we saw this that photo from the foundation. No, so the research studio is divided in different steps every single year. This last fall we did our third iteration, and every iteration has been always divided in different steps. The first one is the analysis and the diagnosis of the current situation. For that, we have analyzed the reality in different scales from continent, country, metabolic regions, and city scale. And we have highlighted 5 main issues that we think as architects and urbanists we can deal with through our design, through our urban and architectural design. No, 3 of them are related with water flooding, urban flooding, water scarcity, and water pollution, and 2 of them are related with what we call lack of basic facilities, especially close to the rivers, and lack of communication, especially between the city and the rivers, the water bodies. No, as I mentioned before, and as you can see in this image, as Addis has all this quantity of rivers and tributaries, we can say that it has a kind of homogeneous landscape, especially if we talk about this relation between a water body and the city. No? So the idea was, okay, let's just work on a specific area. In this case, as you can see in this slide, is the Upper Kevana River from the city center to Entoto Mountains, because the ideas or the strategies that we will design for this area can then also export it to other parts of the city, but also to other cities in the world that they have similar problems. No, that's why then in the next step, in the second step, we have designed a strategic plan for this area for the Upper Kevana River project. And then also we have in a 4th step, in a next step, we have also designed some specific intervention, some urgent intervention in some critical points along this Upper Kevana River. And we will focus on 4 different spatial conditions: bridges, branches, meanders, and public facilities, that in this case, it will be green and blue infrastructures in a more urban condition. And just a couple of examples, just to show you the work that the students has done in this last semester. This is just one network of this blue and green infrastructure that we have designed to a specific part of this Upper Kevana River region. And the idea was just to first to address some of the urban issues that we highlighted at the beginning in the diagnosis. In this case, is specifically with the urban flooding and also with water scarcity. And the idea is to redraw the streets, to remove some lanes that nowadays are for cars, and to give them to give more public space and space for the pedestrian, but also at the same time to design a blue and green network that can absorb that urban flooding and in a more natural way can send to the natural cycle or just to the river. No, there are just some nodes. For example, these water plazas, that they can be public space when they are not, we don't have these rainy moments, but then also they can be as collecting spaces for this water that then slowly we can just clean and throw directly to the river. No, there are also other spaces that when we have these kind of urban pockets that we can use and to implement other kind of basic facilities that we also say that it was the city of Addis Ababa has this lack of public facilities. In this case, it's a soccer field because it was already there, a soccer field. What we are just trying to do is to gather, to collect also that water that we can get from there. We can also clean on the edges of this soccer pit, and then just to send slowly again to the river. No, and then also when we just get close to the rivers, what we are doing is with a natural base step situation, just trying to clean as much as we can that water that we are collecting from the urban scape before we send it back to the rivers. No, and also another idea is to bring also some public spaces or facilities or activities close to the river, because nowadays most part of the city is giving it back to the river. No, so we want just to flip also this situation. No, this is another example, the second example that I'm going to show you. That in this case, the main ideas is just to address the idea of the connectivity, because in many cases, because the lack of a bigger number of bridges, neighborhoods that they are very close in distance, in physical distance, are very far one for each other because of this lack. No, so in this case, we have this. We designed this hybrid infrastructure that is at the same time, of course, a bridge, but also is absorbing part of the housing that we are going to relocate due to some of them are just built in the buffer area, so they are in danger, especially when we have this flooding situation, and also a market to allow the citizens also to have economical component in this case. No, and also, as you can see, some urban agriculture that can also absorb part of this urban flooding and clean also that water. Just some images just to show you this other proposal of this other student, and just a very last photo just to tell you that this is also part this research studio of the Sol Means Global Studios, and there is a grant that allow us to travel actually to Ethiopia. As you can see here, this was just 2 years ago before the pandemic, but hopefully if this situation just changed, what I would like just to highlight is that with this studio there is also an opportunity also to travel and to visit and to have a direct contact with the problems that we will be working in these research studios. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So yeah, today I'm going to present the following research studio, which is the future of urban ports, and it happens here in New Orleans. And before that, I just wanted to present myself a little bit. So I'm an architect, trained as urbanist, and work in landscape architecture as well. So I teach at the School of Architecture, and I have an office open in Barcelona and New Orleans, doing this kind of several scales of projects from architecture to landscape. And I teach research studio, collective housing, and site strategies. Read them here. So I wanted to start with the pedagogical mission somehow. So because of course, architects typically have been trained to design objects. And at the school, we try to, in addition to designing objects, we train architects to think about reorganizing systems. So thinking about spatial, formal, and programmatic, as well as performative. So how is the project behaving over time? It's a performative quality of architecture. It's a performative quality of landscapes with the floods. We see how floods are evolving over time, etc. So we take into account the time into our designs at several scales, from the metropolis to the architectural project. So the pedagogical framework is under the influence of urban ecology. We understand the environment as an urbanized territory that is a mix of human and natural ecosystems. So in terms of just starting off with an example of a project where it's in the urban, in the industrial canal of New Orleans, we study, as Ruben was mentioning, the urban scale. We do diagnosis of the places, and then we propose architectural project that manifest at the detail of what you can see here, which is a 1 to 200, and even in some cases more detail. just, yeah, so that's a sewer, a facility that is combining residential, but also processing of waste, for example. So we touch on infrastructures, how to redesign infrastructures and integrate them into the urban context. So again, and this is based on the practice. So I'm going to show just really quickly 4 slides that are related to the work and the work we do at the office. So we have 4 different lines of design research. We call cities and rivers is where we push the cohabitation between cities and floods. So we have designed, for example, you see here a bullfight arena that gets flooded and unflooded in a safe way, or a large park, this one that you see, that is a water park, a 300 hectares of park, where you have several buildings, 7 buildings that we also built there, where you have buildings that can get flooded in the lower part in the south and in the northern less flooded. So we have this cohabitation, stressing cohabitation between architecture and public space with floods. And that is more and more common at the scale of even regions. So that is something that we have done in our office from 25 years of practice in that sense. So we're trying to push architects into looking at the environment that way. The second line of design research is cities and infrastructures. Same thing, cohabitation of, let's say, integration of tramway into the city, and how is that possible? So how several modes of mobility, like bikes and buses and etc., can cohabit with the same space in a safe way. It means increasing civism into the public space. So we've done integration of tramway and several parks and projects at this scale. As well as you see at the bottom right, you see the power plant. A power plant that is also a public building is a video art center. So it's a facility that do not exist until now. It's innovation and design in the sense that it's a facility that produces heat and cold, but it's also a facility that manifests the way it performs to the citizen. So it's informing that it's generating heat or generating cold through its skin with this interface of video art center. That is a collection of video art center that is meant to communicate that, and it's also visitable. So the integration of infrastructure is really important if we want to understand that there is no citizen of first class, second class, and third class, but because all the infrastructure need to be safe and beautiful for everyone to look at them. So that's in architecture innovation to have this power plant and that is visitable, and it is this video art center that is performing this way. The third one is cities and restoration, preservation, reuse, retrofit, all these strategies that are in school and in several studios. So the idea of reusing in a creative way, it's a field that will grow and grow. We have here like transformation of an old building into a civic center, reusing part of it. And then the fourth one is cities and housing. So collective housing and collective spaces. So is this gray space between public and private that is developed as our designs are promoting it. So this is some examples of buildings we've done. So, and then last international competition one, which is like a big infrastructure of the green belt of Madrid intersecting with the river. So with that, the future of urban ports is trying to put that in action to try to teach students to see analysis of, in this case, a large stretch of land, which is the industrial canal, which is this piece in yellow. It's 5 miles of land by 600 feet wide. And the idea is to imagine a post-industrial reality. So imagining that the port is leaving, what is going to be the linear city that is going to occupy that? And why here? Because it's high ground. So it's high ground as similar to the river, and it's safe. And in terms of New Orleans, the high ground is the most valuable place. So the idea is to make an analysis of the place in detail with the different waterscapes, canalscapes, industrialscapes, and then 3 questions that are about the type of port this city is. So it's a container port, but it's also a primary extraction of oil and gas type of port at different scales. In terms of the container port, it's leaving, is being increasingly behind in its economic role. And the idea is to launch potential futures to be discussed at the collective realm of the municipality and the region. So the aim is to produce solutions for the future, like climate adaptation plans. So you have the port that is going to be increasingly, so that's the land of the port, and potentially ports are becoming more important at the coast, like the Houston, Florida, of course, the East and West Coast. So the Port of New Orleans being behind is the framework for thinking about its future. The second question is extraction port of oil and gas, and that means thinking about energy transition and thinking about how that can look like at the city. We have this huge theme of energy and energy transition in the public agenda, in the political agenda. And the aim for designers is to think how to integrate energy transition, solar and wind at the scale of the metropolis in a way that it's not harmful for people. So they have references of the North Sea, where you have this energy transition big project for 2050. And we are going to do somehow the same with the region of the Gulf Coast. And then lastly, the sea level rise as a theme of microtopography and the idea of settling in high ground as a strategy for the future. And how is that densified? We have some studies of topography of the region, getting to know in depth the metropolis, and then thinking about urbanism in section and how is that possible with the future coming up. And case studies, we've done this upper level, and we're moving along the river to study the same thing. And lastly, just to restate that in addition to teaching, we have this book, Ecologies of Prosperity, that talks about socio-ecological urbanism that I co-edited with Alex Wall, and for you to chat on Amazon if you're interested. Thank you. I think number 3.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Margarita. Hi again, you all. I'm Emily Taylor Welty. I've already introduced myself, so I won't dwell on this too long, but I thought I would show you a little brief overview of Small Centers Design Build Research Studio, and then talk about our most recent project that we just finished up in the fall of this last semester, I guess over Christmas. So, you know, the way I'm framing this is it's an engaged design build studio, and most of our studios, you'll see, oops, going the wrong way. You'll see when Byron presents next, we have a healthy history of design build work here at the School of Architecture. And what we do in the Small Center Studio is expand that agenda a bit to include engagement as well with local communities. Not to say that Urban Build doesn't do engagement with the community partner, but we really focus some energies on expanding access and looking at ways to pull more people, more stakeholders into the design of projects. And so what we're thinking about oftentimes in these studios is these complex or wicked problems of our cities and how we can use the capacity building work of public interest design practice to pull more people in and to really understand how we as architects can be part of a collaborative approach to some of these issues. I won't go too much into all of this, but I want to say that we have a lot of different objectives that we're looking to address in these projects. And for me, the two most important things are making sure that you all get a really comprehensive educational experience through a design build project, but then also that our partner organization gets the outcomes they're looking for in the project as well. So it's balancing that those educational and outward facing goals in these projects, which usually work really well together, but just want to say out front, it's not just about you, it's about our partners as well, and making sure that we're getting the most for for everyone out of these projects. On the engagement end of things, you know, some people treat engagement as a conversation up front and then they go away and design in secret and show what they've designed. For us, it's really about stitching together or weaving in engagement throughout the process of design and fabrication and celebration at the end. And so I'm really looking for opportunities in that short 15-week semester to make sure that we're having lots of points of contact, bringing in lots of outside experts and stakeholders in the process. And then, of course, build. It's a design build studio, so we have to make the thing. And the challenge, as came up in one of the questions earlier, is that because this is a 15-week studio, oftentimes the scope of our projects is a lot simpler or less complex in terms of systems integration and permitting processes than some of the full built projects like urban build or large buildings of that nature, but tend to center around pavilions and, you know, like smaller projects. Sometimes they're a little more product oriented, like in the case of the carts that you saw earlier, the apothecarts. But in general, you know, we've got 15 weeks from the start of a first conversation with our partner organization, our community partner, to a built project that's out in the world. So that's the brief overview of the studio agenda. And then I thought that you all might be interested to see what some of your colleagues were doing this last semester. Most of the time, these studios are a mixture of students. So it's not just graduate students. In these advanced research studios, you'll be working alongside some of the upper level undergrads. But with this studio in particular, I'd say a little over half the group was grad students. And then we had, as I mentioned, some undergrads as well. We worked with Sugar Roots Farm. It's on the west bank of the city. So it's a piece of land where they do a lot of farm-based education, especially for the children in the city. City kids don't get a chance to interact much with animals, farm animals, growing processes, and just understanding food systems, like where does our food come from? And that's a lot of the work that happens at Sugar Roots, as well as a lot of advocacy around food sovereignty and making sure that communities are like healthy and functional, you know, in a way that doesn't rely on all the bigger systems around us. So, you know, when we do these projects, we focus on some early readings and exercises, oftentimes revolving around social justice and design and how these two overlap, what impacts we can have in the design world, and how we can collaborate more holistically to advance these agendas. In the middle of the early design phases of this project, Hurricane Ida passed through the city and did a bit of damage, quite a bit of damage. And so we kind of pivoted and dropped everything for a few weeks and just helped on site with post-storm recovery. They had a lot of structures down, a lot of issues on the farm. And so we put down our pencils for several classes and just went out there and helped, just to be useful. But then also in the process of doing that, we're learning more about the farm and its functions and their day-to-day needs, which helps us fold that into the design. Students in the studio are learning fabrication, you know, some woodworking, some metalworking, welding. Our class this afternoon, I'm going to go from here to teaching those students how to do some welding so we can jump into the project next week that's happening. We also, you know, to the engagement point, we're looking for opportunities to talk not just with the staff of the farm, but also the folks that use the space. So they have a lot of school groups that pass through, and we work some design exercises and engagement activities into some of these field trips that are happening from students. And we're having conversations with consultants around the city, landscape architects, engineers, also experts like Pam Broom on farming and agricultural practices and how that dovetails with community and the needs of some of the stakeholders. And then the hardest part, I'd say, is going from a lot of different ideas down to a single idea in a collaborative setting. So you'll see here some early sketches that started to get whittled down into different agendas, overlapping agendas, down to a couple of proposals on the table. And then the final scheme, which I'm showing here, which is a large covered outdoor kitchen space. That was really what our partner needed, was a space to have cooking classes and also entertain school groups that were passing through. It's hot. New Orleans is hot. They needed a large covered outdoor shady space that they could do some programming, but that also, as we were there on site, we noticed a lot of issues like flooding and some other things that this project could address. I won't go too much into the schematic or diagrammatic approach, but you can see here the final plan of the project that was built. It's about a 30 by 40 foot outdoor classroom space. There is a large swale that's collecting the rainwater that falls on site and alleviating some of that stormwater issue that I was the issues that I was mentioning. A few quick diagrams. I won't linger on a lot of this, but here you can see some of those water management strategies that we're thinking about as we're working through the design process. And then I think one of the challenges of these studios is figuring out at that point how to build this thing. I mean, the fact that we're building it is definitely woven into the decisions that we're making as we design, but the students themselves are self-organizing and figuring out how they're going to divide the labor to achieve the final project. So these are some of their kind of like behind the scenes drawings where they're thinking about what needs to be made, but then also a schedule here on the right of all the pieces so that as they're working in the shop in different times, they can be checking off what's been done, what needs to be done, making jigs. And here you can see, typically in these studios, the design is the first half of the semester, like getting to a design that we can permit. And the second half of the semester is really focused on fabrication and looking for ways to innovate within that space as well. And so here you see some shots from construction. I won't go too deep into all of that, but I did want to show you, one of the questions people has is, after we submit for permit, what am I doing besides just building? And there's so much more to do. So we divide students into other teams, smaller teams that are focusing on issues. In this case, these images are awful, but this is some of the site flooding. So we had a small team of 2 or 3 students that were really looking at what we were calling the blue-green issues of the space and how we could manage water and come up with a comprehensive plan for how we were storing and evapotranspirating some of that water. And so here you see some of the diagrams of that team. I won't go into all the teams, but I just wanted to give you an example of how design is continuing throughout the build process as well. They're thinking about depths and how much water we could reasonably manage on this site. Also, what's getting planted at different depths, some of these indigenous plants and some of the ways that some of the qualities of the space that they're after as they're thinking through these more technical pieces of the process. And then that team, you see some of the members of that team on the upper right, overseeing some of the swale digging and the planting of the natives. And I won't talk about signs, but I'll say that in the end, I just included a picture or 2 of the finished project. So you see the little pavilion here on the right near the street side. And the rest of the farm is kind of in this diagram. But here's the student's drawing and then how that project actually was shaping up at final review. And last week I was there and you can see the bioretention pond is managing quite a lot of water there and alleviating a lot of the flooding and issues they were having there on site with just usability. So yeah, it's out in the world, ready to be used. And I think that's it. I'll say one quick word. This afternoon, you'll meet Tiffany Lynn, somebody that I'm teaching a research studio with this semester. I'm not showing you that project right now, but I'm sure she'll tell you all about it. And you'll get a sense of some other of the research studio work that's happening here at the school. All right, Byron, you're on.
Hi, I'm Byron. Thanks for visiting and welcome to my hometown. Born and raised here. Never thought I'd still be here. That's another story. I'll tell you one day. But Urban Build is a design build program. We're in our 17th year. And we build code compliant homes from the ground up. I'm a professor of practice, and my goal is to help decrease that gap between critical design thought and execution. So I'm of a time period when I was in school, there was a great distance between those who thought they were thinking and those who were doing. And I've really worked to decrease that distance. It's a one-year program. Some people choose to do the full year. Some do just the spring or just the fall. We always start with the design session in the fall, and we run through an iterative process where students come to the table with ideas, they're compared, they're developed together. We move quickly into a phase of design development. We break students up into teams during that studio. We then quickly develop a set of code compliant documents for review, for submission to and review by the city. So you get a little bit of, you get a taste of everything, right? You get a schematic experience, a design development experience, and then a construction documents experience. And then we get those documents submitted by midterm by Thanksgiving of the fall semester, in effort to receive our building permit by January 1st. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we're a little behind, but we always start execution in mid-January. And we've worked over the years with lots of different systems, lots of different colleagues. That's really what I'm most proud of, that students aren't just being given a design opportunity. They're learning how to work together collectively, professionally. They're learning how to work with different materials with their hands, but they're also being trained how to think. And some students run through this program realizing they'll be great project managers. Some leave realizing they may be great material detailers. Some realize they want nothing to do with fabrication ever again in their lives, right? It really is a mixed bag. So that's the overview. What's really interesting, we did not see this coming. We're in our 17th year. And ironically, 15 of the 17 projects are in the same neighborhood. It's a little neighborhood in town, Central City. I think they'll get a tour today, huh, Kentaro, right? And so it just so happened that we worked with most of those, we worked on most of those projects with the same community partner, Neighborhood Housing Services of New Orleans. And they would get lots through an adjudicated process from the city. And we would find funding for the houses. And having a chance to be in one community for that amount of time has allowed us to have some impact. And in fact, I'm proud to say that the neighbors, the members of the community look forward to us visiting each year. And we have a body of work now, and the mission is with the program to maintain and continue to build upon that body of work. You can find out more about this on the website, but I want to speak now to how we tend to work in 3-year chunks of time. We don't recreate the wheel each year. We tend to develop the next housing strategy with some dependence upon the previous. So we start with analysis and we move forward. I'm going to tell the story of how we started the recent body of research 3 years ago with project number 14, which was influenced by 13. The students developed this project, which was all about water management and control, with a roof form that collected the water, fed the ground, fed the garden. And in doing so, we realized that we had developed a home with no windows along the side alleys, that all of the light was brought in from above. And one of my colleagues here said, well, you know, maybe there's a way for us to move forward with urban build by challenging the scale of our developments, that maybe we can do more than just think about the scale of a residence. Maybe we can do more than just think about the scale of dwelling, single family dwelling. And from that point on, students have never thought about the development of a housing strategy, a single home, without thinking about how it might result in a multifamily complex. So for the last 3 years, we've been thinking both internally at the scale of the occupied single family home, and then at a greater scale about how that unit might multiply over time, how it may be replicated. And so that led to the research of project number 15, where really we thought about internal components. And we also became a bit more critical about this topic of affordability and what is a prototype. A critic at one of the reviews asked, so did you guys just make another cool custom home, or is that really an affordable prototype? And that really got us thinking, like, okay, maybe we need to really challenge and reduce our scale of approach. But nonetheless, we still want to make things well and make spaces that are worth occupying. Light is important, materials are important. But in a nutshell, this scheme, number 15, consisted of 2 party walls in the interior spaces. All of this work is done by the students. The students build everything except for what we need licensed tradespeople to do. We can't run electrical or install plumbing or mechanical. But they do the foundation, we frame it, we roof it. I do get a team to hang the sheetrock. That would kill us, right? So they come in and they do that. But moving forward from 15 to 16, we wanted to build upon those accomplishments. And number 16 is interesting because we really blew open the guts of this scheme. Like okay, let's really think about this strategy we developed with reliance upon this internal light core. And how do we really make that special? So we reduced some components, we reduced and simplified the form, and we just brought light in through the center and dealt with the front facade in a really precise, maybe a little bit of an aggressive way, right? With these shutters that are custom fabricated and slide open. And still, once again, we're part of the community. And that's where it gets really interesting. Moving forward, hopefully, for the next 3 years, we have a new community partner. This is the site of the project I just showed you. So this is Urban Build 16, and this is that parcel. And while working on that parcel, I got to know the owners of the buildings behind us. It's owned by the oldest African-American Lutheran church in the country. And a young pastor has just been relocated here from Wisconsin to revitalize this organization. And they have a number of outreach programs, social outreach programs, and they're doing quite a bit in effort to get the community more engaged with the activities of this block. And they feed the public for free 3 times a week. They celebrate the history of their congregation. And we got to talking. He asked me one day, so when we first met, he's like, so how quickly are you going to build this house? And who are you going to build it with? I'm like, well, we're going to build it with these students in 16 weeks. And he says, wow, 16 weeks, that's kind of crazy. I'm like, yeah, what do you do? He says, well, we feed 600 people for free once a week. And I said, well, that's kind of crazy too. And we just became kind of friends, you know? And one day we're talking and he says, you know, we happen to own these 2 properties that we don't really know what to do with. And I'm like, well, maybe we could put housing on them. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. So that's what we're doing. We have developed with this church a master plan for these 2 properties. And in fact, this is interesting. I didn't see this coming, but the city council became aware of this project and is using it currently as an example for what's been recently approved as a new text amendment to the zoning ordinance. Basically, they're going to use this as an example of how unused properties in the city can be spot zoned for multifamily housing, even in areas where that's not properly zoned as of now. And so all eyes are on us, right? We've developed a 4-phase program for the next 3 years. We're executing phase 1 right now. So they'll come to the site this afternoon. So I'll go back to my shop and put on work clothes and I'll meet you there and give you a little tour. But this is phase 1 of what's to come. And we're speaking with the church about other issues as well. We're speaking with them about money and equity and how they're fundraising for this first phase now, but we're giving them the tools to build upon the equity that's provided by our efforts. Once this project's done, they can borrow against this project to do phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And we're working to fuse this research program with our sustainable real estate development program as well. So there might be some overlap there too, okay? So I'll be around for questions and answers later and I'll see you on site this afternoon, okay? Okay, all right, thank you. Go full screen. Hello, everyone. My name is Charles Jones. I'm a licensed architect and also a recent graduate from the Master of Science in Architectural Research and Design program here at Tulane, I guess not quite a year ago. So this studio, Resilience Reinforced Advanced Precast Systems for Regional Water Infrastructure Challenges, is been offered annually. I co-teach with Kentaro Tsubaki. I'm sure you all have met him by now, associate professor and interim director of the School of Architecture. Certainly want to acknowledge all of the previous student work that's been done. This is the 4th year of the studio that's currently running right now. So a lot of the work that they've done has really helped the studio develop in complexity and rigor over the years. And lastly, it's sponsored by the Precast Concrete Foundation, which is an academic foundation that's tied to the Precast Concrete Institute. So they sponsor all of our fabrication costs, material costs, travel costs. And so we're very appreciative of that. And we have a pretty clear hypothesis in the studio. And we're really interested in the performative aspects of surface geometry, and precast is really like the medium that we're using because it's an industry partnership, but also the aesthetics that can kind of come out of those performative developments. And then I think really thinking about higher degrees of functionality in the urban ground plane. So talk a little bit about the goals of the research studio. Obviously working with students on complex advanced topics and design methodologies, really leveraging our interest, Kentaro and mine, which we'll have a couple slides on that, and expertise, leveraging partnerships with the discipline and the industry. So we work with we bring in civil engineers, landscape architects, as well as a lot of people from the precast industry, and even some folks from the site that we've been looking at for the past couple of years. Then aligning with the school's focus as well as the university's focus to kind of become an expert in water management in the city. Yeah, this is really just highlighting a little bit of that framework as well. And then what we're really hoping to address with the studio, highlighted here in magenta, related to material and technology. So exploring the potential of precast systems, modularity, efficiency, and kind of how these things aggregate. And then using advanced digital fabrication processes to really prototype some of this stuff. So we kind of work between a full site scale and prototyping scale. So we kind of expand and contract a little bit as the studio goes on. And then, just a little bit about some of our interests related to digital processes and materials. So Kentaro's done a lot of research really looking at the behavior of aggregated and indeterminate assemblies, as well as surface geometry and really complex fabric forming techniques, as well as really the role that orthographic drawings and projections still play in documenting some of the complexity. And also pretty pertinent to the studio that we're doing. He's got some experience in really transforming infrastructural systems into public amenities. And then some of just one project from my former practice, which really helped us build a relationship with the industry. But this is a precast facade that's essentially kind of like an abstraction of the landscape around it that's been redeveloped and integrated into a precast concrete system that's also looking at different ways to explore how you create variation, but
still thinking about the efficiency or the economy of production. And then some of my recent research, which is really looking at the future of urban streetscapes and permeable paving systems. So again, I think there's a lot of overlap with our approach in the local context and really kind of like the overall university strategy related to water management and flood mitigation. And then this is the site. So this is the Lafitte Greenway. It's really been revitalized slowly in the past 10 years, but it's basically an abandoned industrial space that served as a shipping canal as well as a railway, and it's kind of been rediscovered over the past 10 years. So there you can see it indicated, kind of dashed out in red. And it was basically used to help with shipping transportation because going up the mouth of the river was really difficult. So there was kind of a backdoor entrance that allowed people to come into the lake down a bayou, which is kind of in the middle of that image. And then that was the straightest distance between where the bayou stopped and the back of the French Quarter. So it was a super vital piece to really as the city was initially established to really allow it to flourish more. But due to the fact that it's kind of built up, you can see the ponding overlay here. There was a lot of flooding that was occurring just north of the site because it essentially acted like a little ridge that ran through the city. A lot of that has actually been mitigated since we started this project, which was really just all part of the plan, I guess. And this is just an excerpt from the first studio, which was a little heavy-handed, but I think it really helped us refine, like I was saying earlier, refine the scope of the studio and really figure out kind of what's a good balance between introducing these systems and not really fully excavating out the entire site. So the second iteration, we scaled it back a little. You can even glance at the ground plane to see that we're not really excavating nearly as much, but here we start to really look at the surface geometry a lot more specifically, and then the development of specific precast components, because again, it's kind of like a prototyping studio as well. And then last year, what we did was we took on this idea that the Greenway is basically kind of like a bottleneck, and it's a major drainage. It's a major drainage canal for a lot of the quarter in the CBD area. So we looked at if we can really kind of as the canal is filling, if we can basically expand that and take on a lot of that water to essentially relieve a lot of the flooding that is happening upstream. And that we collaborated with very specifically with a landscape architect in town, Brooke Morris, who's also like a water management guru. So we did she did all this really complex modeling to figure out, to give us, a real framework that we could work within. And this is an example of that studio where we were then thinking about the component of how you connect to the canal. Once it overflows, how do you dissipate the energy? And then how can that really also become like a public space? And additionally, getting into some of the prototyping of that system. So this is really kind of like a complex retaining wall with a lot of other functions embedded into it. And we're in the midst of our fourth year, so we've added 2 really interesting layers. So the first being the integration of soil remediation research and strategies. The site is a brownfield because of its industrial past. So we had a workshop led by Seth Rodwald Bates. He's a landscape architect and works as an associate with James Corner Field Operations in San Francisco. And then the second piece is really looking at the temporal qualities of water and, you know, especially the idea of like the phenomenological qualities of reflection, right? It's something that puddling really happens here quite often. So how can that start to become something that becomes like a major component of how we envision and represent different public spaces? And we've been working on cataloging all of the studio's work over the past 3 years as well. So, you know, we hope that turns into a nice document that really captures a lot of the research that we've been doing. So yeah, thank you. We look forward to seeing y'all. We're actually running the studio in the small center, so you'll get to see a lot of the physical prototyping that we've been doing over the years later on this afternoon. Thank you.